Welcome to the first edition of my fantasy favorites and fades here on Fantasy Football for the People. My name is Ryan Larison. I write for both Rotoballer and Yards for Fantasy, and I am a part of the expert consensus of rankers over at fantasypros.com. I'm here to give you my favorite and least favorite fantasy players for week one of the 2023 regular season compared to that expert consensus. If you want to see my full rankings, there's a link in the description of this video, and be sure to follow me on Twitter at FFTP if you have any questions heading in to week one of the regular season. So let's dive right in to my favorites for this week. First up, we have quarterback Derek Carr against Tennessee. If you decide to stream the quarterback position this year and needed someone to play this week, then look no further than Derek Carr. The Titans allowed the fourth most fantasy points per game to the quarterback position in 2022 and have not changed much over this past offseason defensively. Carr has always thrived playing inside of a dome and will be in New Orleans to start the regular season. With other streaming options like Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love, Kenny Pickett, all of these guys having stiff week one matchups, or in Jordan Love's case, potentially missing his top two options in the passing game. Carr shines as one of the absolute top tier streaming options and is one to look at for a spot start in week one if needed. Moving on to the running back position, we've got Miles Sanders, who's playing against Atlanta this week. The groin injury that Sanders reportedly dealt with this offseason only actually cost him about a week of practice time, per his own admission on Twitter earlier this week. So it's no longer an issue. Atlanta is a solid matchup for opposing running backs to target, but obviously most people would rather target their defense with their pass catchers, as they had a very leaky secondary last year. However, Carolina is in desperate need of pass catchers at the moment, with three of their starting wide receivers all hurt at the moment. Adam Thielen, DJ Chark, both missing practices throughout the week, while Terrence Marshall has been limited with a back injury. Sanders was already in for a heavy workload to start the season, especially with Bryce Young adjusting to the NFL style of play. But they may need him to absolutely carry this offensive week in week one, and he could have the most touches of any running back at the position by the end of the week. So if you had any concerns starting him this week, fire him up. He has top 12 upside. Staying with the running backs, we're going to move on to Javonte Williams playing against Las Vegas. I understand it's a little scary to start someone who's coming off of that torn ACL, but Javonte Williams has had an amazing recovery. And while I personally have been higher on Javonte Williams than the consensus this entire offseason, I'm trying to give you the vote of confidence to plug him into your lineups opening weekend if you absolutely need to. Las Vegas's defense was horrible against the run last season, allowing the seventh most fantasy points per game to the position, and they were top 5 in touchdowns allowed as well. Jerry Jeudy is still nursing that hamstring injury. There is a chance that he plays, but I can almost guarantee that he's not going to be at 100%. So the run game is going to be heavily featured, and even with Samaje Perine there, they're going to do everything they can to take the pressure off of quarterback Russell Wilson. Williams has a great shot to score in week one, considering that the Raiders allowed the top 5 or were ranked top 5 in touchdowns allowed to the running back position. I think he's a fringe RB2 this week. Do not have fear to start him. Let's go on to the wide receiver position and my absolute favorite start of the week this week out of all of my favorites, Jahan Dotson against Arizona. You're going to see a lot of these types of lists throughout the regular season, kind of targeting Arizona's defense as the one to attack with any of your skill position players. And it's for good reason. Carolina has completely gutted their roster from top to bottom and are going to be giving fantasy points out like candy on Halloween this year. So Dotson was already one of my favorite flex options in week one. Now, Terry McLaurin, he's got the turf toe injury. There's a good chance he plays if we're going to follow practice reports this week. However, very hard to believe that he's going to be at 100%. He could even act as a decoy. That's probably a little too extreme, but Dotson is the one in this offense for this week. He's got top 15 upside, a high chance to score, and a lot of it's most likely going to come in the first half if they start to rout the Arizona Cardinals. So if you have Dotson, I know he's the wide receiver 3 or 4 for a lot of teams this year. Find a way to plug him into your lineups. Sticking with wide receivers, we got Chris Godwin and Mike Evans going up against Minnesota. And while both of these guys have kind of dominated the fantasy space over the past couple of years, A lot of teams have them as their wide receiver 3 this year just because they kept falling down draft boards due to Tom Brady retiring and Baker Mayfield stepping in as the starter. Baker Mayfield being the starter should not matter for these guys' fantasy prospects year one or for week one. Vikings defense is terrible, and their pass defense is the worst part of it. They did not address that very much this offseason, and they are putting full faith into their offense to continually try to win shootout games against opposing teams. Minnesota gave up the second most fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position last season and the most total receiving yards of all teams. With Minnesota's offense being as high powered as it is, this game could turn into a shootout real fast, and I want as many pass catchers as possible in this game on both sides of the ball. So these players are going to be rotated out of your flex spot most likely throughout the season, especially with some of the inconsistency you're going to get with Baker Mayfield. But find a way to get them, excuse me, into your starting lineups in week one. And then ending off my favorites part of this list with tight end Luke Musgrave. I wanted to kind of dig deeper into the tight end landscape, basically because Travis Kelsey being ruled out for Thursday's game is going to leave a lot of managers in a desperate spot. Most managers that drafted Kelsey did not draft a backup for good reason. You're never going to play one over Travis Kelsey. However, you have to find an option to pivot to this week, and waivers are thin. So why not look towards Luke Musgrave? Luke Musgrave was one of the favorite targets of Jordan Love all offseason long. Chicago has improved their defense compared to last season, but it should not scare you. Um, where the big thing here is the Packers are likely going to be without Christian Watson, who continues to miss practice with a hamstring injury that he suffered earlier this week, and Romeo Dobbs is dealing with his own hamstring injury that is either going to cost him this game or limit him severely. Luke Musgrave could be the top target in this offense heading into the first week of the season. We just saw rookie Sam Laporta targeted 5 times on Thursday night, and he has more target competition than Musgrave. So there's a good chance that he's peppered with targets regardless of his rookie status. He's tough to trust, but if you have to make a pivot and the waivers are thin, I think that you can target Luke Musgrave as a volume play. And now we're going to move into the darker sides of things for week one. My fades of the week, starting with quarterback Anthony Richardson against Jacksonville. I understand the hype for Anthony Richardson, and I think in a year or two, he's going to be one of the top tier fantasy quarterbacks throughout compared to the rest of the league. Dude's a freak athlete, and he has a chance to challenge for the rushing yardage record at the quarterback position starting this year. However, I am not going to have any confidence in starting him until I see him produce in the pros. Jacksonville's not a scary matchup by any means, but they were rather stingy against rushing quarterbacks in 2022 and only have to guard Michael Pittman since Indy's receiver room is just so shallow. There's no JT. It also puts all the pressure on Richardson to carry this offense without their star running back, and I'm not confident that he's going to be able to do that out the gates in week one against a team that is projected to win this division. I would much rather stream a Derek Carr, even Aaron Rodgers against Buffalo Monday night, even Sam Howell in 2 QB leagues who plays against Arizona. I'm deathly terrified of the less than 10-point affair for Richardson if he commits some turnovers and finds it tough to get into the red zone. Next fade, moving on to the running back position, Alexander Madison against Tampa Bay. I am not against the Madison Truthers for 2023, but I'm having a hard time fitting Madison into my lineups in week one. I have Madison in more than a few leagues. The Bucs have been one of the top defenses against the run for years, and even after a shaky end to the 2022 season, they're going to find a way to stop the run and force you to throw against them. I think that Madison is going to struggle to get those big chunk plays that he's kind of known for when he has replaced Dalvin Cook in the past. And you're going to have to rely on him giving a heavy target share to finish as an RB2 the way that the ECR has him ranked. You don't need to sit Madison this week, but I've seen rosters all over the place where Javonte Williams, Jamal Williams, and even Raheem Mostert are on those benches, and I would play those guys in favor of sitting Madison this week if you have the ability to pivot. Moving on to the wide receiver position, let's go to Tennessee, and I am fading both DeAndre Hopkins and Treylon Burks this week at New Orleans. I'm not expecting a ton from the passing attack in Tennessee to open this regular season. Hopkins can be used as a flex if you have to, but the expert consensus has him ranked as a wide receiver 2 inside the top 24. And there are other wide receivers and even some running backs that I would rather put into my flex than to have Hopkins in my starting lineup, who's going to be covered by Marshawn Lattimore. That's one of the biggest problems for me this week. Lattimore is a star cornerback, shuts down most wide receiver ones on opposing teams, and this is Hopkins' first game with Tannehill. I'm tempering my expectations. I think he's pretty TD dependent this week. And then as for Burks, it's encouraging that he's already coming back from the knee injury and most likely going to make his regular season debut to start the year in week 1. But I'm fading him until I know that he's as close to 100% as we can get. And I want to see what he's able to do if he can take a step forward, kind of like Devontae Adams did when he moved from the number 1 to the number 2 on the offense and got to take advantage of like the secondary coverage of opposing teams. So I'm going to put both those guys on the bench if possible. Secondly, Michael Pittman against Jacksonville. I'm not trying to pick on the Colts, I promise. But I have zero faith in the passing attack to start the season this year. If Jonathan Taylor was active, I would be a little bit more inclined to flex someone like Michael Pittman since his target share is going to be so good. But all that Jacksonville is going to have to do is double cover, triple cover, whatever they got to do to take Pittman out of the equation and force Anthony Richardson to beat them through the air to win this game. And after completing only 52% of his passes total in college, I don't have the faith that he's going to figure that out week 1 against an NFL defense. Matchup doesn't matter for me with Pittman. I need to see it work for fantasy before I am willing to start him in really any sort of matchup unless it's extremely easy. My last fade of the week, and I hate this one because I love the player so much, is Pat Freiermuth against San Francisco. Like I said, Muth is one of my favorite players in the NFL to watch at the tight end position. I love the way his play style is, but I can't start him confidently this week against the 49ers. San Francisco gave up the 6th fewest fantasy points per game to the position last season, and their defense has only gotten better. And the worst part about it is they only allowed 4 total touchdowns to the tight end position all year last year. So the touchdown upside is pretty much eclipsed at this point for this week. Volume should be there, so he might net you a few points, but there's a good chance that you're only going to get a very low 4, 5, 6 point outing in half PPR to full PPR leagues. I like options like Juwan Johnson or even Tyler Higbee to pivot to this week if you have the ability to do so. And that's going to do it for my fantasy favorites and fades for week 1. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that bell so to be notified to all the videos, and come join us on Thursdays where at 5 p.m. EST, we're going to do our weekly Q&A show. Myself and my brother Matthew Larson of Let's Talk Bets. We'll answer your questions live. We're going to go through my rankings every single week. We're going to go through some sneaky starts, some guys that you should probably avoid, and even some waiver wire guys that you need to pay attention to. So be sure to check that out if you get the chance live. And thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.